Well, welcome to the channel, viewers. We're going to do Trained in Silence, why mastery focus is required. We'll open with a welcome to country. An acknowledgement of country. Acknowledgement of country. Before we begin, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this series is recorded. Here on the central coast of New South Wales, I pay my respects to elders past and present, and to Aboriginal people who continue to carry culture, story and connection to country forward. A Christian prayer. Lord God, grant us truth where there has been confusion, peace where there has been fear, and wisdom where patterns have ruled too long. Help us to see clearly, live honestly, and grow into peace. And for the general viewer, welcome to Trained in Silence. This series is about the patterns people absorb before they are old enough to name them, and the truth required to interrupt them. Thank you for being here. So episode 1, title, You Didn't Choose Your Family System, but it still runs in your life. Okay, so the opening hook. You didn't choose the emotional climate you were born into, but if you never examined it, you will repeat it. This series is about family atmosphere, the hidden rules, the tone, the tension, the silence. Not so you can blame your past, it's so you can stop training personality and start building peace on purpose. Point number 1, viewers. You inherit atmosphere before you inherit language. You inherit atmosphere before you inherit language. A child doesn't need a lecture to be shaped. Children are formed less by what is explained to them and more by what is repeated and re-mentioned around them. Tone, tension, silence, unpredictability, affection, anger, and absence all become part of their training long before they can name what is happening. A child learns the world by living in it. Point number 2. A child learns from what repeats. What happens again and again becomes normal, expected, and deeply familiar. Repeated tone, behavior, conflict, silence, or care forms a child's view of relationships, safety, and self long before they can evaluate it. Pattern becomes training. The child learns from the mood in the room. Before children understand words, they read atmosphere. Tension, calm, fear, warmth, anger and silence all teach them what is safe, what is dangerous, and how they must adjust to belong. Next point. A child learns from the way adults handle their anger, shame, affection, conflict, and repair. Children watch how emotion is carried in the home. They learn whether anger becomes danger, whether shame is weaponized, whether affection is safe, whether conflict can be faced, and whether repair ever happens after harm. Next point, that emotional weather becomes a child's baseline definition of normal. What a child lives in repeatedly begins to feel ordinary, even when it is unhealthy. The atmosphere of the home becomes the reference point from which they later understand relationships, safety, and self. Later, viewers, many people keep seeking what feels familiar, even when it hurts, because the nervous system often confuses familiar with safe. What was repeated early in life can become deeply associated with survival, attachment, and belonging. So as a result, people may be drawn back to the same kinds of dynamics, tensions, or relationships, not because they are healthy, but because they feel known. The pain is real, but the familiarity can still register as normal. So let's reflect. What emotional weather did your home train you into? Was it calm, tension, silence, chaos, or performance? Here's a challenge. Write one sentence. In my house, it was safe to... You write something in that space, but unsafe to, and you put something in that space. In my house it was safe to, on the one hand, but unsafe to, on the other hand, and you can think your answers up for those. Keep it plain, no explanations. Here's a proverb. What surrounds you long enough becomes what feels normal. What surrounds you long enough becomes what feels normal. When something is repeated over time, the mind and body begin to treat it as familiar and expected. Even unhealthy patterns can start to feel ordinary, simply because they were the environment you lived in. Point number 2. Adaptation becomes identity if it's never interrupted. Adaptation becomes identity if it's never interrupted. What begins as survival response can slowly start to feel like the person themselves. The child adapts to tension, silence, unpredictability, criticism, or even emotional distance because they have to function inside the environment they were given. But if those adaptations are never questioned, healed, or replaced, they can harden into a person's sense of self. What was once protection starts to feel like personality. That is how coping patterns become identity patterns. So, children adapt to survive. Some become invisible, some become loud, some become responsible too early, some become observers. Those strategies are not personality, viewers. They're protection. But if no one helps a child update those strategies later, the adult keeps living from an old survival setting and calls it just who I am. So in reflection, what do you call personality that is really a survival strategy? Just reflect it for a minute. What do you call personality that is really a survival strategy? Here's a challenge. For one day, viewers, notice your default. Don't fix it, just name it. Say out loud to yourself, that's my pattern, trying to protect me. Proverb. A coping strategy repeated long enough becomes a character trait. A coping strategy repeated long enough becomes a character trait. Point number 3. Context explains you, but it does not excuse repetition. Your history helps make sense of your patterns, reactions, and wounds. It gives understanding. But understanding is not the same as permission to keep passing the same damage forward. What shaped you deserves honesty, but what you repeat still requires responsibility. Let me comment. There are two truths that must sit in the same room. You didn't choose what happened to you, but you chose what you do with it now. If you only hold, it wasn't my fault, you stay passive. If you only hold, it's all my responsibility, you become brutal to yourself. So, maturity is holding both. Explanation without excuses, responsibility without self-hatred. I'm going to say that again. Maturity is holding both. Explanation without excuses, responsibility without self-hatred. So let's reflect. Where do you use your past as permission to keep repeating the same pattern? Where do you use your past as permission to keep repeating the same pattern? Challenge. Choose one small interruption this week. When you feel the urge to react, pause for 10 seconds, breathe, then respond. Not perfectly, just differently once. Proverb. Understanding is not transformation. Repetition is. So, the past doesn't, in closing, the past doesn't lose power because you understood it once. It loses power when you stop obeying it daily. Name the pattern, interrupt it once, and repeat the new action until your body believes you. And that concludes episode 1. Viewers, in episode 2, we'll see and learn about how a child learns from what repeats. How a child learns from what repeats. Thank you for coming in, viewers, and everything you need to know is in the description. If you feel it's worthy to like, I'd appreciate that, and if you think this channel's worthy to subscribe to, that'd help as well. I'm Count Straight, Dr. J.W. Ayoub. Bye for now.